Good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are in the world and whatever time it is for you as you tune in. I'm in your car. Welcome. Good morning, Sarah. Good morning, Yogi. Good morning, Louise. Good morning, Ian. Good morning, Grant. Lovely to see you all. Louise, nice to see you. I did, in fact, see you only like a week or two ago, even though, despite having a very rapid hug, we then didn't, in fact, get to talk at all.
I know, there was so much talking going on. It's great to listen.
Indeed, indeed. And how did you enjoy Dr. Fox's little soiree there? Did you have fun?
It was fabulous. And I didn't see you until we were leaving. It was brilliant. I'd read Jason's book many years ago, Quest, but
Yeah.
I used Michael's work in all of my workshops. And
Okay.
yes, I've always been a fan. And his first book, we approached him and created a workshop from all his maps. So I
All
didn't get a
right.
chance to have a chat to him, but we got permission from him before he started going down that track. So yeah, great work, very easy to use, and it was
Oh,
wonderful to
super
be there.
cool. It was funny because I sat next to a lady who I'd never met before, and I had my iPad out and I was scribbling notes, right? And she goes, "Oh, like I forgot to bring my iPad. Would it be okay if?" Because we got to chatting and we were getting along quite well. And she said, "Would it be okay if you shared your notes with me?" And I was like, "I mean, I'm happy to. However," and then I showed her my notes, and I've taken almost no notes about the content of what they're sharing, and all my notes are about like the engagement techniques that Michael Bungay Stanier is using, and like the things he's doing to interact with the crowd. I'm watching the show rather than absorbing the content, and I was like, I don't know if these are the notes that you really want, but you're welcome to have them.
Yes, and that's I didn't know that side of him, that he was so engaging, because it's only been
Yeah.
through really the books. And yes, I can see I wrote both, and I've been sharing some of the questions that he was using through the session, but then later discovered, listening to the book last week, the week before, it's exactly the same. The
Yeah.
texts are in the book, so
Yeah,
it's very
yeah, totally. He's a really good example too of, so for anyone who doesn't know Michael Bungay Stanier, he wrote The Coaching Habit, and he's now like, I don't know, he's not positioned like Seth Godin perhaps, but he's huge. Like, he's very well positioned. I think The Coaching Habit sold over 1 million copies. Anyway, I'm pretty sure he was born with a cleft palate or some sort of physical deformity like that as a child. And as a result, he has a bit of a lisp, and he has like a minor but noticeable facial deformity. And it's the kind of thing which you could imagine would be like reason enough for someone not to want to stand in front of an audience and be the center of attention. It could be reason enough to say, you know what, I'm going to be an analyst or some kind of back of the room type of person. And he had the courage, and I'm sure it took courage, to go, actually, you know what, my ideas are still worth listening to, and I still have a right, as much as anyone else, to be at the front. And he's an example of a person who turned a uniqueness that could be perceived as disadvantageous, and he's kind of turned it into his signature style in a sense. And now, like, he's incredibly charismatic and really funny and like an absolutely wonderful speaker. And yet he's got a physical facial deformity and a lisp. And I really love that, because like, if he can do it kind of thing, then I look at, say, all of you or all of anyone else in our kind of circles, I go, well, what are you waiting for? Like, what's your problem,
It's so
So
true,
anyway,
because we get in our own way all the time, don't we?
big time, big
And
time.
we know all this stuff, but yeah, we get in our own way. And he's a great role model.
Absolutely. All right, so thank you everyone for coming along. It is the Solo Pro AMA hour. So AMA, Ask Me Anything. It's an idea stolen from Reddit. You get to ask me anything, and the goal is that we uncover any ideas, insights, strategies, anything that you can put into practice to help grow your solopreneur business. And you may have come equipped with a question already, and that's great. But I just thought that I would give you a little structure in which you might want to think about questions, okay? So before we actually start to asking the questions, I would like you to get out a pen and paper, as always. And what we're going to do is just briefly talk about how I think about essentially your entire personal and professional life, okay? I love the concept of orders of magnitude. So do you know what it means if I say something is an order of magnitude larger than something else? Basically what it means is you add a zero. Okay, so if something is this big and then there's another thing that's an order of magnitude larger than that, then it's like 10 times the size, or in that range, if that makes sense. And I would like us to think about our lives and our professional lives at 3 orders, no, 4, not 3, 4 different orders of magnitude. And we'll start at the biggest one and then we'll work our way back down. So the largest order of magnitude that I reckon is kind of useful to think about is 10,000 days. So 10,000 days is about 27 years. And I reckon 27 years of successfully running your business should be enough to kind of put you wherever you want. Do you know what I mean? So like if you're starting this at 50, then obviously in 27 years, you're going to be 77 years old. You might not want to retire yet, but you certainly could be, right? So in 10,000 days time, it's kind of like, where do I want this thing to get to in a really big picture sense? And in some other session on some other occasion, I actually want to dive into this 10,000 days scale in more detail. I don't want to do that now. But why don't you just write down one quick note or one quick sentence, just so we've got something in this one, about like what does 10,000 days mean to you and your business and your professional life? Where do you want to be in 10,000 days time? As I say, I think we could unpack this one for half an hour. We won't do that now, but I just want you to quickly scribble out, in 10,000 days, I would like to, you might like be completely financially independent. You might write, have stood on a stage in front of at least 1,000 people. You might write, I'm going to have been the author of 5 books. You might write, I'm going to have been on the ABC's Q&A. You might write, I'm going to have 3 children and each of them will be at the point where they're having grandchildren, or blah, blah, blah. Yeah, even just be alive. Shane, I reckon, yeah, in 10,000 days time, I'd like to still be alive. That'd be good. Cool. Give me a quick thumbs up if you've just got something scribbled into 10,000 days. I know it's not going to be in like fully detailed. Perfect. All right, cool. So an order of magnitude less than 10,000 days is, of course, 1,000 days. I reckon 1,000 days, which, in case you're not good at maths, is about 3 years. 1,000 days is a good scale upon which to be thinking about kind of the overall direction of your business. 3 years is about the longest time period that I think we can really plan for anything. Because if we had a plan that was starting 2 or 3 years ago, we would never have imagined that ChatGPT or Midjourney or DALL-E or any of these AI tools were going to appear, and they could fundamentally shift what we think is a good idea. And we can expect technological innovation and even just the evolution of society to change enough that I don't think 10-year plans ever really hold much water. In fact, I think 3-year plans, we need to keep them rubbery at best. But what I tend to think of over the 1,000-day scale is, how do I want my business, which in the case of a solopreneur practice really means, how do I want me to be positioned? How do I want the market to think about me? What do I want the market to associate me with? And so what I'd like you to do under this 1,000 days, because this is an ask me anything, and what we're doing here is giving you a framework for coming up with questions. If you were going to ask a question about how you were to position yourself so that the way that your audience thinks about you is going to direct your commercial opportunities over the next 3 years as effectively as possible, what would you want to ask in order to help yourself be really well positioned for your next 1,000 days? I'm just going to give you 20 seconds to dream up a question about positioning yourself for a really effective 1,000 days. And just give us a quick thumbs up if you got some. Give me a thumbs up when you're good. Yep. Yep. Okay, great. So an order of magnitude less than 1,000 days is, of course, 100 days. So 100 days is a bit more than 3 months. It's a bit more than a quarter. And it's a period of time that I really like because, number one, I like to do things differently to everyone else just for the sake of it, because I like to remind myself not to fall into the status quo. So if every other business is doing quarters, I want to do thirds. Additionally, as I said last week, my goal is, and kind of my vision for each of you, is that we get to work about 1,000 hours a year or less at an average of $500 an hour or more. And 1,000 hours a year works out to about 20 hours a week. It's about 22 actually. And then you get to take 2 months off. Right? And so if you have 3 sets of 100 days, then you end up with 2 months of the year left over to go and do whatever you want. And so my vision for your year is that you have 3 blocks of 100 days to get something significant done, right? To really advance the growth of your business in some way. And we do 3 of those in a year, and then you get to have 2 months off whenever you want. So 100 days, I think you should be thinking strategically. So in 100 days, this is a block of time where you can try a completely new marketing technique and really test the boundaries of it and see if it's going to work for you or not. 100 days is something where you can potentially write an entire book, right? From mind map to published can be done in 100 days. Don't get me wrong, that's speedy. But you get that 100 days is like a chunk of time where you can do something genuinely significant. You can launch an experiment and really test the results in 100 days. You can know for sure whether that experiment was effective or not. And so what I'd like you to think is that there's 3 opportunities every year to do something really significant and measure the result. And therefore you should be thinking about these 300-day stretches strategically. What is my best strategic move that I can implement in about 100 days that is going to give me an opportunity to grow my business? So go ahead and come up with a question around strategy that might be useful for you to answer that would help you make progress. And once you've got a question that you like, give me a thumbs up. Thanks, Sarah. Thanks, Ian. Thanks, Yoga. Thank you, Grant. Thank you, Louise. You know, Grant, I'm very proud of myself because, as you know, I'm a natural Grant sayer. And yet every time I see you, I remember to say Grant. It's like locked into my subconscious now. I'm so proud of myself. All right, cool. No prizes for guessing what the next window of time is. 10 days. 10 days, kind of 2 weeks, right? There's 10 working days in a 2-week period. So 10 days, I reckon, is a really nice unit of time to be thinking about in terms of how you can actually get stuff done. 100 days, there's 10 10-day blocks. And so you can design each of your 10-day blocks to make sure that you're tracking towards stacking 10 of them together to make a really effective 100 days. 10 days, I think, is a great period of time to be thinking about productivity. And if you are going to be your business and not just own your business, and I think for everyone here on this call, that's what you are. You are being your business. Your business is you. If you're going to be your business, then if this is going to work, and especially if we're going to make 500 grand a year or more out of it, then you're going to have to be very productive. I don't think there's a debate there, right? Do you agree? Can you make more than $500,000 a year if you're not productive and you're the whole sole business? So what I love 10 days because I think in 10 days you can launch productivity experiments and get a really good sense of whether they're going to work for you or not. I think it's a really lovely stretch of time, 2 weeks-ish, to say, I'm going to experiment doing things this way, and I'm going to have the discipline and the diligence to make myself do it for 2 whole weeks. And then at the end of that period, I'm going to be like, is this working or not? And am I going to commit to continuing this way of being, or am I going to try a different experiment? That is essentially how I've built my entire life over the last 10 years. So come up with a question, might be productivity focused, but about how you might spend either the next 10 days or a 10 days coming up soon. And once you've got a question that you think might be nice to ask, give me a thumbs up. Thank you, Grant. Thank you, Louise. And for Grant and Louise and anyone else who's finished, if you're now looking down at the 3 or 4 or 5 questions that you've created and one of them stands out at you as the one that you'd really love to ask aloud in this forum, can you stick that question in the chat box for me? Because do you get that we have now created at least 20 or 30 or more questions collectively. We're not going to get to all of them. But I think one thing that's cool is the fact that you've created these questions and written them down means you're going to have some opportunity to answer them yourselves. But if there's one that you'd especially like to ask me and or share with this group and workshop, why don't you stick it in the chat box? So we've got a little list of kind of the top questions or your favorite questions or the ones that you specifically want to ask. Because then we've got 40 minutes to smash through them and have a good chat. If your question is really long and wordy, I don't mind if you just put a little like summary of it and you can ask the whole thing. I love having a kind of a list of what's on our mind in the chat box because it gives me an opportunity to weave some questions together sometimes or lead the answer to one question into the next question and make sure that everybody's getting value out of the time together. Oh, I love that question, Louise. That's a great question. Keep them coming. Drop your favorite question or the question that you feel like there is the most value in answering. Why don't you drop that in the thing? Right, so what have we got? I'm just going to read them out. How do you prioritize several half-finished projects, whereas a book in the pecking order of earning dollars or doing other work? Great question. What strategies might work to serve not-for-profit orgs with little money? Yeah, lower costs for group rather than individual mentoring, etc. How do you know the best area to focus on strategically over 100 days and in 10 days how to get more people to speak to? Excellent. This is raw, that's okay. How do I reach out to dysfunctional teams because they won't think they are? Oh, this question's so good. How do you approach someone who has a problem they don't know they've got? Super challenging. I'm assuming you're missing the letter T in the word stay there, Shane, is that right? How to stay motivated and accountable? I think you know how to say those words. I'm pretty sure I've heard you say both of them at some point in our interactions together. Okay, cool. These are all great questions. We've got 40 minutes. Let's try to get through them all, eh? Oh, Sarah's final question. Still working on the direction of my practice. I think it's going to be successful risk-taking. Not sure how to find the market for it. Yeah, right. Cool. All right. All right, well, let's just start at the top and we'll see how we can weave these things together. So Louise, prioritizing several half-finished projects, do you want to, is there anything you kind of want to add or add context around that? Like what's going on in your life?
So I've just finished over a year of a retainer with a client. So it was minimal time, high dollars. And
Love
then
those.
I know, it was fabulous. So in the middle of all that, I started working on kind of different ideas, and I'd create stuff and have it on my website, do a bit of promo, test the water.
Yeah.
So I did that probably four of those sitting on my website. So creative time, and just no interest, but really just relying on a bit of social media, and not really doing the hard work of going out there. And
Yeah.
one of those is a book. So I'm probably bringing the other question. So an idea, and I've got a skeleton. So this would be book number 2.
Yep.
So, it's not really knowing. I don't think I know enough what's happening out in the market.
Yeah.
Given I was so focused working in Sydney and doing what I love, solving big teams, leadership team problems of relationships and conflict. So now
Yep.
I've come back to it. I'm a bit bored because what will I
do? Got it.
But I need to earn the money.
You do. All right. So funnily enough, there's a concept that I was going to introduce on Thursday at the next session that I've got announced. Hopefully all of you are registered for it. But it feels right to introduce it here as part of an answer to your question. So I might kind of rush through it quite quickly, but I reckon you'll get the gist of it. So one of the things that I have been telling people kind of constantly for the last 10 years is that in some ways your practice is just a mathematical function, okay? And it's a mathematical function related to people. So there are people who are strangers, right? And so under the category of strangers, I would put everybody who could gain value from Louise Thompson, who doesn't yet even know who she is. Okay? So there are presumably tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, potentially millions of people out in the world who could potentially be a great client with you. They've never heard of you. They literally don't know you exist. They're following other thought leaders or reading other books or, employing other consultants or whatever it is. They literally don't know who you are. They're a stranger. And if something happens that you can bring them in one level closer, right? So they become familiar with you, they become familiar with the work, hopefully they follow you on social media. Ideally, they get on your list, right? Your email list. I will maintain, at least I would think for the next 3 years, that the most valuable thing you can know about a person is their email address. It's even more important than their name. Always prioritize getting people's emails address. It's the easiest way to turn a stranger into a neighbor, is to have their permission to email them. And that once someone is your neighbor, you can grow that relationship and eventually become friends. And unpacking the metaphor a bit, this might be, they've kind of become a client for the first time. They've done a piece of work with you or something like that, or they're really quite close to you at this point. Not only do they know you, but you know them. Do you know what I mean? Like sometimes your neighbors, they kind of know who you are, but you don't know too much about them yet. And what we really want to get to is people who become our advocates. Because if I look at the business model that I reckon nearly everyone here on this call aspires to, it is, I do great work, and the people I do it for tell so many people that I get enough work out of it's like I do one job and 2 more jobs appear out of it. And so we have this just self-feeding system because we're doing such a good job of making advocates out of people, right, that our work grows for itself. Now, when you are making $500,000 a year or more in your solo business, that is usually, not always, but usually where you'll get to, or at least fairly close to it. Once you're doing over $500,000 a year, it tends to be that you're well positioned enough and that you have enough people who are advocates for you that you tend to be able to get your next friend through a direct introduction. Prior to that point, however, we need to be more actively across these 4 levels. And so I think of your business as a mathematical function of simply how many people, how many strangers can you get yourself exposed to? And then it's percentages all the way down. What percentage of those strangers are motivated to become a neighbor, right? Basically, if they learn about you, do they sign up to your email list? Do they follow you on social media? Do they connect with you in some way and become your neighbor? Of those, what percentage of them become your friend? You know, how many of them go, actually, Louise, I'd love to buy your course, or I need some coaching, or can you come in and do a lunch and learn with my whatever, right? There's some percentage. And of them, some percentage of them go, wow, this was the most incredible thing. I'm your biggest advocate now. You've changed my world. I'm going to tell everyone about you, blah, 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 blah. And I reckon that to the degree to which anyone here on this call is currently not making as much money as you want to, hands up if you're not making as much money as you want to yet. Anyone on this call, if you're not making, okay, literally everyone. So I would suggest that if we look at this column of numbers, we want to find the lowest one and fix it, right? Or if you've got multiple low ones, we go, oh, okay, well, because we kind of need all of them. It's no good being able to turn strangers into neighbors if you never, ever, ever convert a neighbor into a friend. Do you get what I mean? If this transition is 0, it makes no difference how good you are up here. Does that make sense? Yeah. So, Louise, I've been rattling on about this. Let's get it back to your question. You're saying, how do I prioritize projects? How do I work out, where is a book in the pecking order? There's 2 ways that I would answer that. Number 1 is there an obvious failure in your business at one of those transition points? Are you really bad at attracting new strangers into your world?
Yes.
Right? And if you are, then that is where we need to look first. Are you really bad at turning strangers into neighbors? And if you are, then that is where we should look, right? So if there's one that's an obvious deficiency and you're like, you know what, I'm pretty good at turning clients into vocal advocates, right? From going friends to advocates. Okay, cool. Let's not worry too much about that then. Because the way the mathematics happens to work, let's say you had 100 points to spread around. Does that make sense? So you can either put 100 into turning friends into advocates, but if you do that, then you're 0 in all the others. The way the mathematics works, if you want to make the biggest number at the end, you should spread your points evenly. You want to be evenly good at attracting new strangers, turning them into neighbors, turning them into friends, and turning friends into advocates. So my first question would be, if you know for sure that you're just worse at one of those than all the others, then the projects you should prioritize are the ones that are going to address that, because the mathematics simply suggests that is going to have the biggest impact. Okay? So that's the first way of answering it. If there's an obvious deficiency, fix that deficiency. The second way of answering it is, can we execute on projects in a way that has a positive impact at as many layers of this as possible? So writing a book is one example. Now, I'm sure you've heard me bang on about this, but I'll bang on about it again. When you're writing a book, if you lock yourself away in the proverbial ivory tower to write the book until completion, you are not having an impact on any of this stuff with that effort. And therefore, I think you're stupid.
I've lost sound.
You've lost sound. Am I still around? Oh no, everyone else can still hear me.
Not me.
Oh dear, Louise, sort it out.
Oh, that's better.
Okay, good.
Sorry.
So if you write a book in your proverbial ivory tower, right, where nobody can see what you're doing, nobody can hear what you're doing, then you are by definition having absolutely no impact across any of these critical interactions with people. Yeah. Which is why I say, when you're going to write a book, you should write it in public. Because if you're writing it in public, you might attract some new strangers when you publish some, little piece of a chapter that you're halfway through writing, or you share a really cool idea that you just had, or you take some exercise or model that you're thinking of putting in the book and you put it out into the world, and let people check it out, right?
Yeah.
Then you might attract some strangers, or you might make strangers go, wow, this next book she's writing is fantastic. I think I'm going to, blah, blah, blah. So the second way I would answer your question, which, to remind everybody, the question was, how do I prioritize half-finished projects? I would say, which projects can I complete and have a positive impact on as many of these as possible? So when you say, should I finish writing my book? Yeah, you should. And it should happen loudly on social media. It should, you should ring up existing clients and say, hey, I'd love to send you the chapter that I've just written about blah, 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 because I think you'd have great insights for that. And that might turn that person from a friend into an advocate. Do you know what I mean? It brings them in closer, or it might create another opportunity to work with them or whatever. Can we not restrict ourselves to saying, well, this project is just about writing a book, and instead realize that it's writing a book and it's moving people closer and closer and closer and closer and closer to me, and turning as many of them from strangers into advocates as we possibly can? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Col. Yeah.
So you can change your mind later this afternoon or tomorrow or in 10 days' time. But based on that, of your half-finished projects, what do you think you should do next?
Mute my phone first. What I need to do is use the book, which wasn't actually an idea, but I'm just thinking I could turn the book into one of my projects where I'm running workshops on, which would create the content and do what I did with the previous book. I did it online. I got people, it was in COVID, so people were commenting. I use that in the book. So I might actually have 3 projects running. One is writing it, one is running some public workshops on it, and even do some buskouts to maybe get some content from people. I was thinking of interviewing people. So that actually might be great for me, making it easier to reach out to people opposed to asking for work, but getting people to, would you like to give me a case study?
Interviewing is a fantastic way of creating connections. Okay, quick pause, everyone. We've just paused the world. It's like the Matrix, okay? Time slows down. I'm writing a book right now. I'm writing that book in public. I'm currently running a free public workshop with content from the book. This is it. You're in the Matrix. Do you see what I'm doing here? I'm turning all of you from neighbors into friends right now with something that I'm writing. Do you get that you might offer me a story or some kind of reaction here that's going to help make my book better? It's going to help make my next commercial offer better. It's giving you value along the way. It's happening. This is what we're doing. It's what I'm doing right now, and it's the same thing that I want you to do. Sometimes it can be weird to self-referentially do things, but I just wanted to point out that is exactly what we're doing right now. Wonderful question, Louise. Thank you very much. Iain, you've made the noble and sometimes challenging decision to work with not-for-profits. Tell us about that.
Just to preface that, Col, by saying I think that last discussion was really helpful as somebody who kind of retreated through COVID into working for one customer and writing very long books, longer than any book I would write, but without the ability to get those benefits along the way. So yes, my issue is that I feel I'm banging my head, but I'm trying to work in the area of child welfare. And generally with government departments or not-for-profits. Thinking about your 1,000-day horizon, I mean, I'm not going to retire at 1,000 days, but maybe 2,000 days or 3,000 days. If I'm going to work for not-for-profits before I retire, I need to find a way of doing that rather than just ignoring them and working for richer government departments.
Yeah, totally.
I've been thinking of, and it's not one or the other, I'd like to do both. I've been thinking about, is it possible? So generally they don't have much money or any money, or they're not to buying those kind of services, or they expect government to fund training, for example, rather than pay for it themselves.
Yeah.
And often when I sit down with them, I appear to offend them because I've asked for money at all. So there's a bit of a disconnect there. So I'm trying to wrap my brain around, is there a way of doing, say, group mentoring at a lower cost rather than individual mentoring and that kind of thing? Or will it take so much bloody time to do that, that actually I maybe need to make a success of financial success with government, and then once I've done that, roll it out for nothing or cheaper or whatever afterwards. So
totally.
That's what I'm.
Yeah. So I think you've kind of at least touched on the ways that I think about solving this problem, because the first question that I think is worth answering is exactly that one you just said. If I think about how I can have the biggest impact in the world, so for example, you've probably heard of the effective altruism movement, right? Which basically says, rather than volunteering your time to help kids in Africa, you should just lean into your specialization, make as much money as possible out of it, and then send the money to people whose specialization is helping kids in Africa, right? And so if you, I'm not an effective altruist. I think there is something to the magic of doing something for yourself and how it makes you feel to help yourself rather than just make money and give the money away. But anyway, so there is one question that says, Iain, is there in fact this other group of people that you could really easily make money out of? And rather than, as you described it, banging your head against the wall, does it make more sense to just make money out of them and then donate your time or donate your expertise to this other group in order to satisfy your egalitarian urges? I love that you have them, by the way. I love an altruist. I want to be one myself, so I love it when I'm surrounded by them. I'm glad that you're here. So that is kind of the first question to answer. I can't answer it for you. I don't know, the specifics of the situation you're in, the possibility of working with others or whatever. But it's definitely a good question to ponder in a kind of sober way, right? If we decide, we do actually want to proactively go towards these not-for-profit organizations, then I have a few thoughts about it. So the first is, it's definitely possible to do it. I've got friends who work in the space of public schools, for example. Now, I remember that public and private schools are the opposite in Melbourne, in Australia versus the UK, but I'm talking about the ones that don't have much money. Okay? We call them public schools. And so people would say, oh, you can't get any money out of public education. It's impossible. I know someone who not only grew their practice to $1 million, so a single person business, he had a couple of little helpers or whatever, but he grew it to $1 million selling to public schools. He then flipped that single person business into an entrepreneurial structured business. And last month he did $1 million month. So the idea that you can't get money out of, these types of organizations just isn't true. It just means that you've got to know how to do it. And so I guess to answer your question generally, anytime you're going to make a commercial success of something, you have to know where the money comes from. And I know plenty of people who've failed to sell into commercial businesses that should have lots of funding because they didn't understand the funding structure. And they didn't understand that this person had a budget of this much and they could sign off on these amounts on a credit card that they had access to. But if you expanded it beyond, some particular number, suddenly it's got to go to 8 other people. And there's, an oversight committee that decides and blah, 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 blah. You've got to know how the money flows in any organization. And so one of the things that I think that you can do when you're trying to work with not-for-profits is to essentially make the challenge of finding money something that you do as a team where you're on the same side, right? Rather than where they're the side who has the money and they're trying not to spend it, and you're the side who doesn't have the money and you want it from them to provide the service. You want to change the valency of it so that both of you are on the same side, the side of trying to find money to put towards this project to help the kids, right? And turn those people who could otherwise be the gatekeepers of money into the allies of seeking it is essentially what you want to do. So my friend Rebecca, she is essentially a strategic planner, or these days she doesn't do the plans so much as guiding executive teams to create strategic plans for not-for-profits. And they have always struggled to find money. but she has worked out how the funding flows, and she has worked out how to turn them so that she is a partner of them getting the money to pay to create strategic plans. And so they now do more effective proposals to go back to their funding structures, whoever they are, right? So that the money comes in. And she now has made 750,000 Canadian dollars a year for the last 4 years in a row doing strategic planning for not-for-profits, where, yeah, if I meet someone who's in their second year doing it, of struggling to make 100 grand, they'll tell you it's not possible. It is possible. You just got to know where the money comes from and create the right team to go and get it. So not knowing the particular not-for-profits you want to work for and not knowing the particular funding structures, in a general sense, that's how I'd answer it. Can you find out where the money comes from? Can you make a partnership with the people who you want to spend the money with you to help them get that money? It's not their money. They're not afraid of spending it with you. Their concern is not having enough to spend, if that makes sense. If you can help them get that money, then this can become a completely profitable way of doing it, especially if you can demonstrate the value. Because if you can teach them to demonstrate the value, then, you know, you and them together can go and get that money from wherever the funding supply comes from.
Okay, thank you, Col.
So I don't know the answer, but I've seen plenty of people do it. It's definitely possible. That's how I think about it. Cool. Mr. Verhoeven, you want to ask a question about 100 days, 10 days?
Yeah, Cole, on the 100 days, how do you go through a process of picking which one strategically to focus on? Are there parameters that you would suggest looking at? Do you just go through an ideation, then a prioritization stage? So I'd be curious on your takes on how do you pick? And maybe you're going to answer it on Thursday, but in 10 days, how do you approach more strangers? And what are the techniques to do that?
Cool. Can I answer the second question first?
Yep.
So the second question is, how can Grant approach more strangers? Just get more people who could benefit from Grant's knowledge and expertise and help, and get them into his world and turn them into neighbors, right? There's a functionally unlimited number of ways of doing this, Grant. And the primary organizing filter that I use to decide which one you should do specifically is what is going to give you the most energy. So let me ask you all a question. Under what condition would you get more done? Condition number 1, you have unlimited time, but very little energy. Or condition number 2, you have very limited time, but effectively unlimited energy. Under which condition will you be more productive and get more done and have more impact? The first or the second? Everyone agrees it's the second. The limiting factor in our lives is not time, it is energy. And so the way that I think about essentially all of these is around energy. Because if you're going to do all of these really well, Grant, if you're going to attract strangers, can turn them into neighbors, become friends with them, and eventually deliver so much value to them, and in such a way that they love it so much that they become vocal advocates, do you get that if you have to spend energy every step of the way to make that happen, eventually you're going to run out of energy? And we've all just agreed that even if you have unlimited time, if you don't have energy, you will not succeed. So the way that I decide what is the one I should do, whether it's, at any one of these, whether it's here or here or here, is what gives me energy. So if you're the type of person who loves talking to strangers on the internet, right? If you love hosting webinars and you're happy to put them online and have completely random people who you've never met in some cases come along to those webinars, I'm talking about myself, then that is the strategy you would do. Do you get that I'm having fun right now? Now, I know that none of you are actually strangers. I've literally met, I think, all of you before, right? But I'm totally happy for a complete stranger to rock up here, and it will give me energy to answer their questions. And when I hang up from this call and go hang out with my kids and actually meet up with Katie Rees, who was on the webcast last week to talk about the renovation on our house, because we've employed her to do that. That's what I'm doing straight after this. Do you get that I will feel energized? Because this interaction with all of you is a positive one for me, whether or not you buy anything specifically from me, whether you ring me straight afterwards and say, Col, I want one-on-one mentoring. I don't care. I'm having a great time right now. So the very first thing I would ask yourself, Grant, is what gives you energy? So there will be people on the internet who are saying things like, you know, you have to run Facebook ads with click-through rates of 0.27%. And I'm like, I can hate that. There's nothing about that feels fun for me. So I'm not going to do it. On the other hand, I love the fact that Lisa Miller is there, and I haven't talked to her yet, but I'm gonna, because she's awesome. And I've actually stayed in her house when she lived in New Jersey, but I know she moved to somewhere warmer. But you get that I'm having a really good time, which means that this method of turning strangers into neighbors and neighbors into friends is really easy for me to do over and over and over again, because my energy is going up. Equally, and I'm not going to force you all to put up your hands and say, yeah, it is cold, but I hope, right, that for all of you here, you are also going to leave this call with a little more energy. And I reckon the most effective strategies right throughout your business, in every single way, are the strategies where both you and the people who you seek to serve get more energy as a result of the interaction. So if you go to a sales call, right, and you come away from it like, ugh, then you're not going to make sales call. You're not going to make sales. And equally, if you go to a sales call and your potential client is like, ugh, then you're not going to make sales. That conversation has to be one where both of you are energized. So what should you do over the next 10 days to get more people to speak to? Anything that you think might be fun. Anything that won't draw your energy down. Now, it doesn't mean that it doesn't make you nervous. It doesn't mean that you don't have to like put yourself out there a bit. It doesn't, like, I'm not saying that you just get to avoid anything that you think might sound slightly uncomfortable. I'm just saying there's got to be a spark there. Do you know what I mean? So, I don't know, Grant, film yourself 2 minutes a day giving a great tip about, are you still doing careers and stuff? Is that right? Right? So why don't you 2-minute tips 10 days in a row, right? Monday to Friday for the next 2 days, for the next 10 days, you do 2-minute tips. And it's where you give a 2-minute tip about growing your career on a selfie video as you walk into the co-working space in, are you in Wellington or Auckland? I've forgotten. You're in Wellington, aren't you? Yeah, you're in a co-working space in Wellington, aren't you? So you do a 2-minute tip when you're walking into your desk. You get to spend 2 minutes selfieing yourself, talking about how to grow your career. And then you post that on LinkedIn 10 minutes after you sit down. Now, if you find that vaguely energizing, then that's a great experiment to run for 10 days, right? And the reason 10 days, everybody, is a really good window is, do you get that if Grant only made himself do that once, number one, he might not push himself over the initial discomfort. He may not get to the point where he can edit that video up and get it online in less than 20 minutes, which is what you need to do for any of this stuff to work, right? If he only does it once or twice, he hasn't actually experimented with it. But if he makes himself do it 10 times, then he's actually like forced himself to get proficient enough at it to see what it would be really like if this is what he kept doing every day. And also, if he does it once, maybe he does a good video, maybe he doesn't. Maybe the algorithm picks it up, maybe it doesn't. Maybe the right people see it, maybe they don't. But if he does it 10 times, it's like enough of a volume. The experiment is kind of, it has enough to it that he might actually see the results of it. So Grant, 2-minute tips is my idea for you. You can pick whatever you like, but I want it to be something that makes you go, woo. Not something that makes you go, ugh. Because you don't need time, you need energy. And so does your audience. They don't want you to talk at them for an hour. They want you to spark them up. They want you to light a fire.
Thank you.
Excellent. Lisa, you're in a special case because if I'm not mistaken, you're also running a business that probably has how many employees here going on?
Yeah, it was 20, but I sold my business in August 2022.
Did you?
Yeah, I got to catch up with you, Carl. Yeah, so I'm going to be going solo in January, February. That's why I'm here, but I sold the business.
Woohoo! How exciting!
I'm-
Oh my goodness.
I'm free.
You're free. That's fantastic. Are you like at least partially rich as well?
It was pretty good.
Excellent. That's so good. Wonderful,
So
wonderful, wonderful.
So that's why I'm here. I don't know how to run a solo practice.
All right. Well, I know that you knew how to run a really good business, so I'm honored to give you some ideas about how to run a solo practice. That's fantastic. Wonderful. Lisa, if you have a specific question, we only have 8 minutes left, and I'm going to try and get through everyone. But if you have a specific question, what would it be?
This sounds like a funny question, but because I had a company and I had lots of employees and I started a practice, but I guess for me, kind of reinventing myself now is like what's that next best step like? And now I'm thinking it through, Carl, but what is that next best step to reinvention?
Yeah, cool. Okay, cool. So that actually kind of sounds a little like Sarah's question, where Sarah's saying, I'm still like trying to work out what I'm about. Who am I here to serve and what am I here to serve them with? So one of the challenges that I think we all face is that humans are naturally averse to the unknown. And that is why, we are naturally fairly conservative. We're fairly risk averse. We like to sit in our safe little space. And I talked about evolution a lot. I assume that's because those of us who were less conservative in our decision making, we got eaten. There were lions or famines or whatever. And those of us that stayed near the food and water that we knew was secure, but didn't really do anything particularly interesting, those ones survived. And so we have this natural tendency to be a little bit risk averse and to have this general fear of the unknown. And so the way that I think about cracking through that is to recognize that there are limits to our ability to make predictions about the future. So there are limits about our ability to understand what people are like. There are limits to our ability to understand what they'd be willing to pay for or what they're seeking to help. And it absolutely is a good idea to sit down and think, not as much as we can, but a lot, to think a lot about who we want to serve and how we could help them and what we could offer them and all that sort of stuff. And at some point we have to accept that our predictive capacities are limited. And that what we should do, therefore, is launch experiments to find out. Okay? So, Sarah, you think that there's something to successful risk-taking. I cannot help but note the irony of this.
Here we go again.
Right. So you've got a remarkably good opportunity to test your IP out on yourself. Because you thinking that there should be a market for people who want to do risk taking successfully, you get to now take a risk and essentially coach yourself through it using your own IP. And it's an opportunity to test that IP out by essentially swallowing your own dog food, taking your own medicine, if that makes sense. But what I want you to do is to create an experiment that will allow you to test that. So there was a really nice insight shared by a guy who, in another world, I would have tried to compete with him. He runs a business called Building a Second Brain. His name's Tiago Forte. He's pretty cool. But essentially he's into note taking. He's like personal knowledge management. Anyway, he said, if you can get people's attention, you're 80% of the way there, because attention is a lot more scarce than money. So Sarah, you're saying you think that there should be people who want to take more risks and do it successfully, and you're not quite sure which market to go into. So what I want you to do is launch an experiment to see if you can get someone's attention. You don't necessarily have to sell them anything, but you do have to be able to get their attention. Can you get 5 people onto a webinar where you talk about X? Because I know for all of you here, you may not have paid me money yet, but I know I'm close. Do you know what I mean? Like if you're willing to spend an entire hour of your day with me, I reckon you'd probably give me money for something. Right, so my experiment's working because I've got your attention. So I just want you to get their attention, because attention, like I think when we think about, get someone's money off them, it has all this significance and we get all weird about it because humans are all weird about money, right? But what if I said, all you got to do is get their attention? Can you just demonstrate that you can get their attention? And if you can, what would be a 100-day strategy for doing that? Or even better, what could you do in 10 days to at least just like get them to poke their head up over the parapet and be like, oh, what's she doing? That looks interesting. What is the quickest way that you could get their attention? Any idea? Sorry,
I'm not sure if that's rhetorical or not.
No, not rhetorical. Straight off the top of your head, what is the quickest way you could try to get their attention?
It's like, who's they? This is the problem.
I don't know. Who is it?
I don't know.
Who needs to take risks?
Everybody.
Okay, I reckon it's probably easier to sell risk taking to people who already know they want to take risks than those who don't. Okay, so if you go to a traditionally very conservative industry, they're probably going to run away from you. This is the same thing that yoga was asking about, right? How do I reach out to dysfunctional teams because they don't know they are, right? Reaching out to people who don't want to take risks is probably a difficult way to sell risk taking. I reckon it's probably more likely to work for people who want to take more successful risks, but they're not averse to the risk in the first place. So, I mean, the very first thing you could do is post on LinkedIn and be like, I've noticed that I've spent my entire life taking risks and maximizing my ability to make them successful risks. Who are the industries that actively take risks all the time? Do you know what I mean? Like just canvas the world. Who takes risks and needs to do it more effectively? And get a list of industries. And then once you've got 6 that you like, go, do I know anyone who's one of these? Or search LinkedIn for anyone who's got a job of that type. But just get the attention. Try to get the attention of a few people who have that issue. If you can get their attention, somewhere not far behind that, you'll get their money.
Yeah. That's what I was thinking of, sort of in that startup world.
Yeah. I mean,
Because
every startup is taking a risk.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Which is why that's what, and I've got a potential into that group. It's just an area I've got to understand that market better.
Okay, so depending on which bit of startup world you want to go into, lots of startups start in co-working centers.
Yeah.
Right? So ring up the 5 nearest co-working places and be like, who are the startups there? Can I come and talk to them? I want to run a thing about risk taking. Do you want to host a session there? I'll do it for free. And anyone who wants to learn about how to take calculated commercial risks can come along. If nobody turns up, just go and buy a coffee and pretend it never happened. But if 8 people turn up, you've got their attention.
Yeah.
And not far behind their attention, there's a commercial relationship to be found. Okay? Play with attention. Launch some attention experiments. Whose attention can you get? And if it's like you literally have no idea, then ask people who've, like you're connected to everyone on this call and thousands of other people. Be open about what you're trying to do. I've been a risk taker all my life. I'm so good at taking risks. They almost never blow up in my face. I want to teach other people how to do it. Who needs to do this better? Crowdsource some thinking. All right, we are at time, so if you need to hang up and go to another call, I totally get it. And I bet Katie Rees is somewhere in my house, so I'm going to leave in the next 4 minutes, but I want to make sure that everyone who asked a question gets their question answered before we go. So, very quickly, yoga. How do I reach out to dysfunctional teams because they won't think they are? One of the things that's going in my book, and one of the things which I'll teach on one of these calls in the next month or two, is a 4-part problem matrix. But it basically says that everyone has practical problems and personal problems. So practical problems are things like my pen doesn't work. Personal problems are the stress that I have as a result of that. Okay? And then we have problems that we know about and problems that we don't know about. And so if you make that into a matrix, you have these 4 squares. Okay? Most of the real value is selling people solutions to problems they don't know they've got. But your access point is through problems they do know they have. And often they are somehow related to or created by the problems they don't know they've got, right? But what you've got to do is get their attention through the channels where they do know what their issues are. So dysfunctional teams, right, they may not know that they're dysfunctional in the way that you think about it, but they may, for example, continually miss their sales target, or they may continually miss their productivity target, or they may struggle with budget, or they may have meetings that, like, so here's a great example. This is my favorite book title of all time, The 25-Minute Meeting. Half the time, double the impact. Donna McGeorge doesn't want to spend her life teaching people how to run better meetings, but she does know that if you've got shit meetings, you've got a shit culture, and she does want to work with you on fixing your culture. This is the known problem, the practical known problem that they've got that she wants to help them solve, because it actually taps into their unknown problem, which is you don't know how to set a useful context for a team to work in. So this book touches on the problem that they're looking to buy a solution to, even though she actually wants to help them with the deeper rooted issue, which is the culture that's there. But she's going to sell them a workshop for a day that costs $10,000, right? She's going to sell them a way to fix meetings. And as part of that, she's going to be like, so tell us about this, tell us about that, tell us about that. Sounds like you might have some deeper cultural issues going on. Should we sit down for a couple of hours later next week and have a talk about that? And now she's selling them what she really wants to sell them. So my question to you would be, what does the dysfunctional team have? It could be shit meetings, right? But it could be something else. Essentially, start where they actually want to spend money already is usually the easiest strategy, and then use the relationship that develops from there to take them to where they really need to go. Is that helpful? Perfect. Shane, how to stay motivated and accountable. I don't think that I can tell you how to do that, because I think that all people are different. But my bias is to make it a question about energy. I reckon lacking motivation, at least this is how it feels to me. So I'm interested if this feels right to you. But I feel if I'm lacking motivation, what I'm really doing is asking myself to continue pouring energy into something that doesn't give me energy back. If I continue pouring energy into something that doesn't give me energy back, at some point I'll say, I can't be asked. I don't want to do this anymore. And I could call that lacking motivation, but I actually think it's an energy issue. And so I ran an online go-kart racing shop. And I might have been lacking motivation to do the online marketing required to make an online shop work. Or it may just be that I don't like doing that. And I don't have energy for sitting at a computer working with minor percentages of click-through rates and whatever. I wasn't lacking motivation. It just wasn't feeding me what I need. And so if I'm lacking motivation for something, my question is usually, can I achieve the same end a different way and in a way that I really enjoy doing? Which is why I'm a big advocate for people who record their social media video while going for a walk or while whatever, because if it means that you actually do it, that's far more effective than, you've got the energy to do it 3 times and then you run out of steam. So I guess my question is, what you're trying to achieve, can it be achieved a different way and in a way that will energize you rather than cost you?
Possibly. I think it depends on the activity. Like last week, we were talking about, if you're just staring at a desk, just go and do something that'll, you want to do until you run out of energy to do that, which was great, except that I could just spend all week pottering around outside and just do no work at all.
Can you call people while pottering around outside?
Possibly, yeah.
So like and it's been harder here since, because where I've moved is really annoying. It's in a deep hole in the ground and I don't get phone reception. And so we've had to set up this Wi-Fi network to try to cover it. But at my old house, I did most of my sales calls while weeding. And I don't love weeding and I don't love sales calls, but you do the two together and it was kind of nice. Do you know what I mean? And the weeding gave my hands something to do. And because like my hands are always doing something. Right now I'm playing with a hair tie, right? I've been playing with this for half an hour. My hands are always doing something, sometimes distracting me. But I found that by weeding while doing sales calls, my hands had enough to think about that my mind was allowed to concentrate on the person I was talking to. So it's quite a magical combination. It worked quite well. If you could potter around outside all day, then I'm like, well, cool. What can we plug into that? Because now you can do that all day. Do you know what I mean? Get 6 people to ring and just ring them and do whatever you want outside. They don't know whether you're at the desk. And in fact, even if they know you're not, most of them don't care. So I don't know, try that.
Thanks, mate.
Okay. Everybody, has something valuable come out of this? Awesome. Can you do me a favor? Can you write some kind of glowing testimonial about the last hour in the chat box right now? Would that be okay? It doesn't have to be long. And you definitely don't have to lie. I want you to say something truthful. But can you just say something truthful about what the last hours has been like? Partly because I want to take those testimonials and put them on my website. And partly because I want to demonstrate to all of you, again, press the button, we're in the matrix, time slows down. I want to demonstrate to all of you how easy it is to start to get some momentum behind something. Once you've written your testimonial in, go to my website and click on the For Solopreneurs button to go to the Solopreneurs page. And have a look at how good my testimonials all look. And realize that almost all of them were from last week's 1 hour session. But that immediately in 1 week, I've made that page look like there's, shitloads of people who are super loving this thing. And I literally just got them to type in the chat box at the end of a session. Marketing yourself and growing your positioning and all that stuff, it's actually not that hard. And you're not doing any rocket science. I just invited you to a Zoom and you turned up and I was generous with my time and energy. And then I asked you for a favor at the end, and because I was generous, of course you'll be generous. And then I stick that on my website and I look like a genius. I'm not a genius, I'm just a smiley dude. Right? And you can do the same thing. You don't need Coles and Commonwealth Bank and Mercedes on your website to look good. You just need some real human beings saying, oh, yoga was great. She really helped me out. Bam. And you haven't even paid me. But my website looks really good. It's super simple. And I'm about to do it again. I've had more aha moments in an hour with Cole than I've had in the past 6 months. Like, how good is that going to look? Got Louise's attention. Shortly after that, whether hers or someone else's, I'm going to get some money. It's going to be great. And you can do the same. All right. Thank you, everybody, for coming along. It's been wonderful. Hey, Lisa Miller, I'm going to stick a little link in the chat box to you, and I just want you to click on it and then find a time. I haven't talked to you for ages, and I have to talk to you again.
Yes.
In fact, that was rude. Everybody, if you want to talk to me one-on-one, you just click on that. And if that doesn't work, just send me an email. I will happily do some weeding outside and ring you, right? I will. My lawn is a fucking disaster right now, so it needs some weeding. So if you want me to call you while weeding, I don't know, maybe click on that. That might be a bit formal. Just send me an email and say, Cole, can you call me while weeding? And I will. Thank you, everybody, for coming along. It's been wonderful to have you. And I hope this has been useful. And there will be many more things to come. I've got lots of big, exciting announcements in the works. But basically, if you want my help, just send me an email and let's make something happen. Until next time, I'll see you soon. Ciao.